Yes, what I'm going to talk about primarily is what are the things you need to have in managing mental health related claims and how does that benefit your business. So the key issue in managing mental health is to be really clear about what being good looks like in your business. It means, do you have what are called lawful and reasonable directions, which both the common law and the safety legislation requires employees to comply with? They are things like job descriptions, so people know what their job is. They're things like the policies and procedures around what is good behaviour within an organisation. They're the things that define your culture in the organisation, like values, which should have behavioural indicia so people can understand what being good is. One of the overwhelming reasons people develop mental health is lack of clarity. They don't know what good looks like. They're constantly trying to find what it is, and it changes from day to day. But we know at common law, employees must comply with lawful and reasonable directions. We know in safety law, section 25 has the same obligation. We know under the Fair Work legislation, regulation 1.7 says failure to comply with a lawful and reasonable direction is serious misconduct. Okay? So what I've listed there for you is what are the things that you must have as an employer that A, promotes good health and B, allows you to manage people. The major problem behind developing a good culture is the leadership failed to honour the good culture. That's the major problem that happens. So we say this is what good behaviour looks like, and we turn around and we see the managing director do the exact opposite. And as a result of that, people don't know what good looks like. Okay? So they're the things I want you to think about. What I want you to understand is there are key processes that are terribly important. Simon talked about bullying, discrimination, and harassment as being a major cause. The major cause is actually misconduct. On that continuum of good and bad behaviour, bullying is right up here. Bullying is repeated acts that objectively cause damage to someone's safety at work. It's very hard to get there. But the smaller misconduct from day to day, that aggregational behaviour is the stuff that really damages people. So when you look at your policies and procedures, don't have a bullying harassment procedure, have a misconduct procedure that talks about those bits of behaviour that move towards bullying, harassment and discrimination. And sure, define them, but just remember, any time a person breaches your code of conduct, your values, your policies and procedures, it's misconduct. Okay? Therefore, what is being good in an organisation is living through the lens of living those values, living those behaviours, following that code of conduct and following the processes within an organisation. And the effects of that will be threefold. One, you'll have less employees because the variety of capacity that sits inside the organisation that's condoned from day to day wouldn't be present because people would be fulfilling their job descriptions. And if you look inside your organisations, you'll see there are people working at 70%, at 40%, at 50%, some because they're lazy, some because they're injured, some because they're old like me. But if we're actually managing people's capability, we'd actually have less employees. And those employees would have certainty and clarity around what good looks like, and we could manage them correctly against it. Which brings us down to the issue of what is the thing that changes a workforce dramatically, and that is skilled supervisors. People who understand what good looks like, who follow the values day in, day out, who measure people through the capacity that's described in the job description, and who stop any breach at all from occurring. Because we're moving at a fair amount of speed, I just want to talk about reasonable management action because I think I'm around about the 7-minute mark. Yes, I am at the 7-minute mark. Reasonable management action is really easy to define. It has two major parts. It has, am I dealing with a person fairly in relation to the issue? And is the outcome of that fair? So it doesn't matter how you cut or shut it, that's what's going to happen. So if I go to manage someone's performance, is it reasonable that I should be managing that performance in the way I do? So have a look at the procedure that sits around it. And when I talk about the most recent case, it'll remind you that workers' comp world is entirely separate from the rest of the workplace law. It's treated very, very different by insurers and by the people who make decisions. So what is my process? Am I following it? Is it reasonable that I do that? And is the outcome at the end fair, objectively, based on the facts and circumstances? That's what Reasonable Management Act is. One of the three defences to a psychological injury claim. First one is not injured to the degree that is necessary under the legislation. Second, work is not a substantial contributor. Third, reasonable management action. So when we look at Shoalhaven City Council v Booth, and I just had to use it because it had Booth in it, Simon, that was a case where someone had a 20-minute phone call with a woman, Miss Hour, which during the process he said, look, you're too good for your husband, you're really attractive, you're a gorgeous girl, we all think you're a really gorgeous girl. That goes on for 20 minutes. At the end of it, he said, look, please don't report me for sexual harassment, will you, whatever you do. That was just before he said, I think I could be the right person for you. She made a complaint straight away. They approached him as any good employer would do and said, look, we're not going to stand you down, we need to assess the facts in it, but a claim of sexual harassment has been made against you. And they all observed that he was utterly shattered when they said that. Now, as a matter of workplace law, that's good behaviour, by the way, because you haven't investigated, you're unable to articulate with accuracy what the allegations are. But in the insurer world around this, what you have to do is ensure the person has the opportunity to have a support person present when you raise it. You have to actually notify them of what the allegations are, even though you don't know what they are. And you must provide them with the necessary support if you notice anything changing in that person's mental state. And in this case, they had an EAP program and they failed to advise of the EAP program, even though he knew there was one, and as a result of which the claim was accepted. So what is the lessons out of that? Well, one is workers' compensation continues to ignore what workplace law is. That's the first one. The second one is, if you've got policies and procedures, please follow them. Please follow them meticulously. Whenever you wish to raise an allegation against a person, please make sure they're provided the opportunity of having a support person. I know that's not what the Fair Work Act says, but do it. Make sure that before you raise it with them, you have sufficient particularity to be able to say exactly what the allegations are. And if they show any signs of being distressed, immediately offer the support process that you have and explain how to get there and what that will do for them. And if you don't do that, you'll be in breach of that recent case, which shows it's a weird world, but that's sort of what you've got to do. That's me.